People sometimes ask me what the city manager actually does. And the honest answer is, it's hard to explain. Not because it's complicated, but because the job isn't just one thing. It's dozens of things happening at the same time. 1 minute you're talking about a major infrastructure project. The next minute you're reviewing the city's budget. And 10 minutes later, you're dealing with something completely different that wasn't even on the radar that morning. So for this episode, instead of trying to define the job in theory, I thought we'd do something a little different. I went back through my calendar and my notes and looked at everything I worked on the first 2 months of this year. And let's just say it's a lot. Today I'm going to walk you through what those weeks actually looked like, the meetings, the decisions, the problems, and the constant juggling that comes with running a city.
Welcome to the Calimesa Insider Podcast, the official podcast of the City of Calimesa. Join City Manager Will Kolbow as he takes you behind the scenes of city projects, community stories, and the future of our hometown. Stay informed, stay connected. This is the Calimesa Insider Podcast.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to the Calimesa Insider Podcast. I don't know about you, but 2026 has just been flying by for me, and I think today's episode will actually give you a little insight as to why. But before we get to that, I did want to mention a few things coming up for the podcast. First, I have finally talked our community development director, Kelly Lucia, into coming on as a guest on the podcast, and she'll be introducing us to a new way to get developer and capital project updates. So you know how annoyed I get from speculation on development projects that end up being wrong 99% of the time. So now you'll be able to have a tool to be able to show those Facebook experts what's really going on with development in the city. Also, I have an interview scheduled with Riverside County Transportation Commission Executive Director Aaron Hake for late next month. We have the interview scheduled for April 30th, so that episode should drop, if everything goes according to plan, on May 1st. So last time on the podcast, I talked about the League of California Cities City Manager Conference and the various lessons and nuggets of information that can help us be better here at home. It did get me to think about something that I don't believe I've adequately addressed. What does a city manager actually do? It's a question that gets asked a lot, and one that I even ask myself from time to time, to be honest. Sometimes it's asked out of curiosity, sometimes it's asked because people assume the job is mostly meetings, and sometimes it's asked because people genuinely want to understand how a city runs day to day. The honest answer is that there isn't a single clean explanation. The job is not one thing. It's not even 10 things. It's dozens of things, often happening at the same time. And the best way to explain it isn't by just describing the job title. It's by showing you what the work actually looks like. So what I want to do today is walk through the first 2 months of 2026 and give you a snapshot of what those weeks looked like for me. Not every detail, because sometimes things involved personnel matters or negotiations that I can't just discuss publicly, but enough to give you a sense of how the job actually works. And one thing you'll notice quickly is that no 2 days look alike, not even close. So in early January, the year started pretty much the way most weeks do for me, with a meeting with the mayor. So the city manager and mayor talk regularly because the mayor is the presiding officer of the city council. That means they often have the first look at upcoming issues, community concerns, and policy questions that may be coming to the council. And that particular meeting involved a conversation about the golf course property. And that kind of discussion is pretty typical in a city like Calimesa. Land ownership, development interest, long-term planning. These things evolve over years or decades. Sometimes people want to explore possibilities. Sometimes they want to understand what the city's role is. And sometimes they want to test ideas. My role in those conversations is usually to provide clarity about the process, what's possible, what isn't, what approvals are required, and how those decisions ultimately get made by the city council. Later that same day, I was talking with staff about the Mesa Verde project and annexation issues along Cherry Valley Boulevard. Mesa Verde is one of the most significant long-term development areas in the city, and projects of that scale involve constant coordination between planners, engineers, environmental consultants, attorneys, and developers. Those conversations happen continuously because large projects move forward in stages. The next day looked completely different. That morning, I started with a one-on-one meeting with our finance director. Those meetings are where we talk about the city's financial position, budget trends, long-term planning, and municipal finance is one of the most important parts of the job because everything the city does, roads, parks, public safety, infrastructure, ultimately depends on the financial decisions we make. In that particular meeting, we talked about mid-year budget trends, revenue estimates, and the timing of major capital projects. One of the things people don't often realize is that when a city is financially stable, large infrastructure projects can temporarily reduce available cash simply because construction payments happen before reimbursements arrive. That kind of planning requires looking years ahead, not just months. So after that meeting, I sat down for my regular meeting with our Public Works Director. Now, Public Works covers everything from streets and drainage to fleet management and infrastructure planning. Those meetings usually involve reviewing ongoing projects, talking through operational issues, and making sure we're prioritizing the right work. Later that same day, I had a kickoff call for the city's strategic planning process, and I talked about this in the last episode about the process we're currently undergoing through with that and what that means. But this is the day that the process actually began. The process involves interviews with council members, staff input, stakeholder discussions. It's not something that happens overnight, and it requires coordination across the entire organization. And that was just Tuesday. By Thursday that week, I was sitting in a joint collaboration meeting with the city of Yucaipa, Calimesa Joint Unified School District, Yucaipa Valley Water District, and Crafton Hills College. Then I was sitting in a webinar on sales tax forecasting, discussing an environmental compliance issue with regional agencies, and recording a podcast episode. That combination of topics is pretty normal. Transportation, finance, regional coordination, emergency management, public communication, all in one day. The following week started with a phone call about a large property known as the Stearns property. That property has attracted interest from multiple developers over time, including most recently the proposed but now defunct Oak Valley North project. But it also has significant infrastructure challenges. Conversations like that involve reviewing engineering information, understanding development constraints, and figuring out whether a project is even feasible before anything gets too far down the road. Later that same day, we were interviewing vendors for a technology project related to surveillance infrastructure in parks and public spaces. That kind of project requires evaluating equipment, software integration, privacy considerations, and cost. Immediately after that was our regular staff meeting with department heads. Those meetings are where we coordinate across departments so everyone understands what the organization is working on. Then we had a capital improvement program meeting, essentially reviewing infrastructure projects across the city, roads, drainage, facilities, utilities. These projects often take years to design and construct, so planning them properly requires constant updates. One example we discussed was the Cherry Valley interchange project. And as you know, that project involves coordination with multiple agencies, including the county, regional transportation authorities, and Caltrans. Funding sources include grants, regional funding, and federal earmarks. So managing a project like that means tracking engineering progress, right-of-way acquisitions, environmental requirements, and funding agreements all at the same time. And that's just one project. The next week included meetings related to environmental review for the Mesa Verde project. Environmental review is a legal process that ensures major projects evaluate impacts related to traffic, biology, cultural resources, air quality, and many other factors. Those meetings involve planners, engineers, attorneys, and environmental consultants working through technical issues to make sure the project is legally sound. The sequencing of approvals alone can become complicated because environmental documents, development agreements, and zoning changes all have to line up correctly before the city council considers them. Later that week, I had a call with congressional staff regarding a federal grant application for the Cherry Valley Boulevard interchange, and it required coordination with engineers, consultants, and federal representatives to make sure the application aligns with federal funding priorities. In between those conversations, I also had a meeting with a consultant working on the city's economic development website, a phone call regarding an easement issue along Calimesa Creek, and a standing meeting with stakeholders related to the Oak Valley Town Center. So again, transportation, environmental law, economic development, flood control infrastructure, and federal funding, all within a few days. Towards the end of January, we held a Finance Committee meeting, which consists of the mayor and mayor pro tem. Finance Committee meetings focus on budget trends, financial audits, and major fiscal decisions. That particular meeting included a review of the city's annual audit. For those that don't live in the world of public finance, an audit is essentially an independent review of the city's financial statements. The auditors examine transactions, internal controls, and financial reporting to make sure everything is accurate. Receiving a clean audit opinion, which we did, means the city's financial records are considered reliable and properly managed. After that, we discussed the mid-year budget outlook. Some revenues were trending higher than expected due to development activity, while other costs, particularly legal services related to the Everest performance bond litigation, which we've talked about on the podcast, were also increasing. The goal of those decisions is to adjust the budget responsibly without overreacting to temporary fluctuations. Later that same week, I met with one of our council members individually. I meet regularly with council members so they can ask questions, raise concerns they're hearing from residents, and discuss upcoming policy issues. Those meetings are an important part of the council manager form of government because council members set policy, but the city manager is responsible for implementing it. That means communication needs to go both directions. Around the same time, I also met with Caltrans staff to discuss roadway maintenance issues, spoke with a mobile home park resident regarding an appeal hearing, and reviewed legal invoices. None of those issues are related, but they all require my attention. Moving into February, the schedule shifted again. One morning started with a meeting involving the mayor and a council member regarding some personnel matters. Now, those personnel matters are one of the areas where I have to be careful about what I discuss publicly because situations like that typically involve reviewing policies, consulting with legal counsel, and making sure the city follows proper procedures. Later that same day, I met with the mayor pro tem to review the sheriff's department's reporting data. That conversation involved looking at how patrol activity is measured and how we can improve transparency so the city council can better understand workload and performance metrics from the sheriff's department. The next day, I was discussing a federal grant for the Cherry Valley interchange with engineers, meeting with a chaplain who provides support to first responders, talking with our finance director again about budget planning, and reviewing planning issues related to a specific property. Later that week, I had breakfast with our fire chief, met with congressional field staff about transportation funding, spoke with the county about animal control billing, and coordinated with consultants on a surveillance project. And again, that's just 1 week. The following Monday started with a call from the fire chiefs to follow up on some internal department issues. Immediately after that, I met with a developer to discuss transportation requirements associated with a development agreement. Then I had lunch with our city engineer and South Mesa Water Company General Manager Dave Armstrong to discuss infrastructure coordination. Then we held another staff meeting. Then we held another capital projects update meeting. The next day included our first bargaining session with the Firefighters Association. Labor negotiations are another area where I can't go into detail publicly, but they involve discussions about compensation, working conditions, and organizational structure. Later that same day, I had a conversation with someone who hosts another podcast about potentially appearing as a guest, a meeting with a council member about regional energy programs, a discussion about wildlife corridor planning near the El Casco Creek, and a meeting with Howard Reeves about the Calimesa Youth Baseball and Softball League. One day, 5 completely different topics. Mid-February included the League of California Cities City Manager Conference, which I discussed in our last episode I mentioned earlier. When I returned from the conference, the schedule immediately picked up again. One morning started with a call involving Riverside County flood control regarding a drainage project affecting property along Calimesa Creek. That discussion involved engineers, county staff, and a property owner whose development plans intersect with the proposed storm drain alignment. Situations like that often involve finding practical solutions that allow infrastructure projects to move forward while also addressing property owner concerns. Later that day, I attended the training for the city's new financial software system, met with our public works director again to discuss the new city hall renovation process, and prepared for a city council meeting that evening. Council meetings require significant preparation because staff reports, contracts, and policy decisions all have to be ready for public discussion. The following day included a meeting about a street renaming request from Yucaipa Valley Water District, meeting with our city engineer to discuss project coordination, a standing meeting with the stakeholders in and around the Oak Valley Town Center, and a quarterly sales tax call reviewing economic trends. That sales tax call involves analyzing regional spending patterns, which helps forecast revenue trends for the city's budget. Later that week, I attended a WRCOG, or Western Riverside Council of Governments, Technical Advisory Committee meeting. That organization coordinates transportation funding, energy programs, and regional planning across multiple cities. And you may recall we had Chris Gray, the Deputy Executive Director, on the show previously. In that meeting, we discussed the Transportation Uniform Mitigation Fee, which is a regional program that helps fund major transportation projects across Western Riverside County. And again, that program has been discussed previously on the podcast. Those regional meetings are important because many infrastructure projects depend on coordination between multiple jurisdictions. Finally, towards the end of February, I spent time reviewing proposals related to the new City Hall renovation project. That process involves evaluating architectural proposals, reviewing building conditions, and determining how the renovation should proceed. At the same time, we were also coordinating with staff from multiple departments regarding code enforcement issues, event permitting for the upcoming Scottish Clan gathering, and concerns related to public safety for that event, and long-term planning for the State of the City event. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I recorded another podcast episode. So when people ask what a city manager does, the answer is this: a little bit of everything. Finance, infrastructure, personnel management, economic development, public safety coordination, regional partnerships, legal issues, grant funding, community programs, long-term planning, sometimes all in the same afternoon. And by the way, in between all those meetings and conversations, I'm answering emails, returning phone calls, having impromptu conversations with staff, dealing with issues that just pop up every day, and making sure everyone is supported and has what they need to do their job. What makes this job challenging isn't just the volume of work, it's the constant switching between completely different topics. You might go from a conversation about environmental law to a discussion about street maintenance, then immediately shift to labor negotiations, then review financial forecasts, then talk with a resident about a neighborhood issue. There's very little downtime. And because cities operate in the public eye, decisions often need to be made quickly and carefully at the same time. That means you have to stay organized, stay informed, and stay flexible. Because the one thing you can always count on in this job is that tomorrow will look completely different than today. And honestly, that's one of the reasons I enjoy it. Every day is a puzzle. Every issue has its own history, its own constraints, its own stakeholders. The job is to bring those pieces together in a way that helps the city move forward. That's what the city manager does. So with that, we will wrap up this episode of the podcast. If you're a new listener and want to make sure you don't miss another episode, click that subscribe button now. The audio version of the podcast can be found on all major podcast platforms, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts and others. Please share the podcast with your friends and neighbors so they can also be in the know on what is happening in our city, and follow us on Instagram and TikTok. As always, thank you for joining me on this journey. I hope you have a good couple of weeks, and I will talk to you again next time. Take care.